Hey guys! So for this week's My Life with ADHD, we're going to be talking about how our ADHD inspires and enriches our lives. And I know that sometimes it's really hard to see the positive in all that negative or in all of other people's projections of negative onto who we are. But I think it's really important to be able to reflect and to see how we've benefited from having our brains made a little bit differently from everyone else, or how we've used growing up or finding out that our brains are different to go on and make something bigger and better than ourselves. So today I'm going to be talking about my personal inspirations and positives for having ADHD, but I would love to hear back from you. Let me know what you guys, how you guys have benefited from, how you guys have been inspired by your ADHD. So, as so many of My Life with ADHD videos, I'm going to do a list first, and then we're going to talk about individual specifics one by one. And that just kind of helps me stay on track, and it helps you guys know where I'm going with this. So, my ADHD has inspired my life in lots of ways. But as an artist, there's three things I really want to focus on. ADHD and being ADHD has inspired my work with my webcomic 7-inch Kara, because even though it's never obliquely stated, Kara is supposed to be coded to be an ADHD little girl. And her behavior and her experiences are based on things that I did as a kid or that my friends did as kids, and it's very much based on little girls with ADHD. I don't ever explicitly say this, because I don't want that to be, I don't want someone to go in with a prejudice against Kara or expect certain things from her and then be disappointed. I want people to be able to recognize themselves in her behavior. I also wanted to portray ADHD in a very positive and likable light, because we've gotten a lot of like kind of nasty media representation when we get any at all. And it was really, really important to me to have a female character with ADHD, because it's typically depicted as being something that little boys have. And a lot of the literature that exists, including the nonfiction literature, is aimed at helping men and boys who have ADHD. So it's really important to me to make Kara ADHD and to depict that in a positive light. And no one ever uses that against her. She can be kind of overwhelming at times. She can be very enthusiastic at times. Her emotions can flip on a dime, but no one ever uses that as, that's never a reason to punish Kara, and that's never a reason her mother is angry at her, and it's never, I just really wanted to have everyone in her life kind of accept Kara for who she is, because that's really important to me. And then I think that's really important for a lot of children, especially kids with ADHD. They usually feel like outsiders, or like they're not quite on the same beat as everybody else. So it was important for me to depict a little girl character who has the same neurological issues that I have, but they're positives for her, and they're positives in her life. And Lilliputian Society and 7-inch Kara doesn't see those traits as detrimental. So it's just a different type of society where those traits can be seen as positive things. And that was really important to me, and it's still very important to me, and it's still like a driving factor in how I characterize and how I draw Kara. And I don't know that there's much out there that is, I think all that's out there about girls with ADHD in the comics realm is autobiographical, if there's anything at all. I seem to remember a couple, but I also remember not liking those books. No slam. Again, my experiences were just so different from the creators' experiences that I had a hard time identifying. That's why I didn't care for them. So it was important for me to depict a fictional female character aimed at children in a very positive light, but she still has these traits which in our society are kind of considered negative traits. So that's really important to me, and people have accused me of putting myself in Kara, and I guess I put a lot of my experiences in her, but I really feel she's more like my daughter than she is me. The love I feel for this character is not the love I would feel for myself, and I am the sort of creator who I don't want to put too much personal stuff in my comics. I've done some autobiographical comics. Cicada Summer and When I Was 13 are both autobiographical, and they do actually involve my ADHD, but those are both smaller projects, and they're less accessible, fewer people have access to them. So while that's super important to me, and I try to depict it, and actually the more I think about it, the more I'm like, all of your female characters have ADHD. Becca, when you were doing Ready, Set, Go, Remy is a college-age girl with ADHD, and Critical Missy has ADHD, and Kara has ADHD, and in Cicada Summer, the main character, who is you, has ADHD. So I guess I am really into ADHD rep, and that's important to me. I didn't think about how important it was, but it's really important to me because I felt like such an outsider growing up and such a weirdo, and all of the information that was available for me was written for boys, or like my teachers would be like, well, usually boys have this, or you don't have this, this is a boy you know what I mean? Like, you couldn't possibly have this because you're female. Which, if you're a female comic artist in the Deep South, you hear that a lot anyway, so you really don't want to hear that in regards to yet another thing. So my ADHD has really inspired my comics, and it's just really important to me to make things like that. Even if it doesn't always find its audience, I'm still going to keep putting it out there. It's really important to me. So my blog is also very inspired by my ADHD in a lot of ways. A lot of my own art education was self-directed, and when you're ADHD, that is incredibly hard. It takes so much discipline, motivation, drive, and desire to force yourself to work through a book with no one to check in on you, or to do figure studies every day with no one to hold you accountable. There's like no accountability when you're driving yourself to improve or to learn new skills. And I grew up in an environment at a time when on the internet there just wasn't not a lot of art education. Julie Dillon did a series of really good tutorials, and that was kind of it for the longest time. So I created my blog in 2009 to kind of pay back as like a thank you for that, but also to put more information out there, to show things in a more realistic way, and to just kind of share my experiences, because I was getting ready to go to grad school at SCAD, and I wanted to kind of give like a step-by-step of what I was experiencing while I was there, so that other people could decide if that school was right for them, or they could replicate those experiences at home when possible, or in small groups. And that focus of like transparency has shifted over to this YouTube channel because it's a lot easier for me to talk to you guys than it was for me to write in a vacuum. But honestly, like, the way I pursue art supply reviews is very ADHD because I kind of pursue my obsessions. If I'm super obsessed with alcohol markers, I'll review every alcohol marker on the market. And sometimes I don't really show a lot of restraint when it comes to spending, which is another problem that I really need to work on. And it's not a good problem for an artist to have because we don't make much money. And it's hard to find people who value what we do enough to pay for it. So, in another way, my ADHD has inspired me launching a Patreon. I know, clever segue, right? Because people seem to like the reviews that I was doing, but I needed a way to better fund them. And after about 10 years, we're going to hit the 10-year anniversary of me starting the blog this year, I decided I've kind of had enough. And I'm tired of carving out significant portions of time to write about art supplies. And I don't even know if I'm finding my audience anymore through blogs. I kind of feel like blogs are not really the way to go to reach younger people to help them educate themselves. So I started this channel, and I kind of took all my bad, maybe ADHD-fueled habits over to here. So, those are not necessarily great inspirations, but they're honest inspirations. When it comes to certain things, I'm incredibly impulsive. And then when it comes to everything else, I'm intensely risk-averse, which means career-wise, sometimes I get into these nasty holding patterns where I don't take new risks and I don't do new things. So my ADHD has also inspired me to launch a challenge series, and I have a video kind of explaining that in depth. But one of the challenges I'm going to do for myself is applying to agents every day, and just kind of bootstrapping myself into a better position if possible. Bootstrapping is even supposed to be kind of an oxymoron. Like, you can literally not pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But just kind of trying to use the accountability I'm setting up here with you guys and acknowledging my flaws, acknowledging my downfalls in a positive light to kind of help me pursue the things I want to pursue. So I think that is a big inspiration that my ADHD has had. Now, I mean, I've always been daydreamy, and I think that really fueled my writing. I used to write a lot of short fiction and poetry, and unfortunately doing the blog means I can't do that. So I'm excited to end the blog so I can go back to doing that. It definitely fueled my desire to make comics. And I remember seeing Inuyasha in Suncoast at 13, and I'm totally dating myself here. And just like, it was a female comic artist. I'd never seen that before. I grew up in rural Louisiana. We literally had Archie, yawn. I know the CW? The CW is doing a pretty good Riverdale run. Let me tell you something. Archie, when I was a girl, was the most boring, dated 50s yawn fest I could conceive of. A couple of Marvel titles, which I used to watch the cartoons, but like I could never figure out where to get in with the comics, and the same goes for DC. So like I didn't get into comics proper until Inuyasha. And I wasn't even that big a fan of Inuyasha, but it got me into manga. And I got obsessed with it. You guys can see where this is going. And so I started, this is before Google even. So I guess I was Ask Jeevesings, like comics, and I found webcomics, and that kind of told me that even if you don't have someone publishing you, this is something you can attain, this is something you can do. And I just got super obsessed, and I haven't really looked back since. So I've used my ADHD hyper-focus to make comics for the past 18 years. And I've had some successes, and I've had some shortcomings, and in some ways when I'm on, I'm really on, and I can be really vivacious, and some people really resonate really well with that. And so my ADHD has made me charming sometimes, so that's great. Like, I think I've been able to make friends with people or win over people that I might not have otherwise have been able to make friends with, because I was being my ADHD self and being charming, but also being compassionate and being very interested in what they had to say, because like, hey, it's all new to me, it's super exciting. And it's also driven my passion. Unfortunately, in the past few years, I've had some really horrible events happen in my life that have almost ground out that passion entirely, but I'm feeling it start to come back. And I look forward to having opportunities to show how passionate I feel about what I do. I often hate the comics industry, and I often don't like webcomics as a community, but, and I know that's like fighting words to say, but it's the truth. But I love, love, love comics as an art form, and I love comics as a form of literature and a way of communicating and a way of expressing oneself or expressing ideas in a palatable form. So I guess ADHD kind of fueled my love affair. And then there's like this insinuation, and I find it even in books written by ADHD people for ADHD people that were immature. And that could be the case. But I don't like the correlation between appreciating cartoons and appreciating comics, appreciating things that someone had to like think about and put time into to create and draw and craft into this finished thing. I really resent the connection with immaturity. And that doesn't mean I don't think those things are for kids or can be for kids. I do, but I don't think being a child just means immaturity, because immaturity implies a comparison between someone else your own age who is more mature, and that doesn't even necessarily make you a better person either. So I guess the fact that I'm still kind of like childish and excitable, and I feel things really intensely, and I experience things really intensely, I think that's all probably part of my ADHD, and that's so part of who I am and how I tell stories, and the kind of colors I use, and the fact that I'm going for watercolor, which is very evocative and very time consuming. I feel like just like the more I'm talking about it, the more it's like it's hard for me to like pick things apart, because it's like a whole. It's all who I am, and who I am is I'm an ADHD person is one of my attributes, one of the things about me, and it's been one of the things about me for my entire life. I've I don't think I've ever not been ADHD. I mean, disclosure, my mom smoked when she was pregnant with me, and she lived in an abusive, very anxiety-ridden household, and she consumed a lot of caffeine. So, and she was teaching at the time. So, like, and I'm pretty sure both of my parents well, my father, I'm pretty sure, was ADHD, and I'm pretty sure my mom is, and she just copes phenomenally well. So, I feel like I didn't have a choice. I was going to be regardless, and it's not something that ever wasn't not there. It's just that the available information and the available studies have never caught up. So I guess I can't divorce me as a person with ADHD from the work I create and the inspiration and the things I feel. So that was something. Like, we came to this together. So thank you guys for going on me with that journey, because I entered this feeling like this was clear cut. Kara, the channel, the blog, very inspired by me being ADHD. But as I started to like think about things and unravel things, it really just seemed like everything in my life, the good and the bad, is tied in with my ADHD, because it's so part of who I am and it's so part of my personality. And even when I was medicated, and I was talking to another friend with ADHD, and we kind of came to the conclusion that perhaps I was not being medicated appropriately, because nothing they were giving me was working. But to be fair, it was Adderall, Concert, or Ritalin, and their generics at like various dosages. So those were stimulants, but maybe they weren't actually helping me solve the problem that was really making my symptoms bad, which is that I have never slept well, and I don't get enough sleep. Even when I sleep like 10 hours, I don't get enough sleep, and I don't hit REM until like as I'm basically supposed to be waking up. So maybe science has kind of caught up, and now would be a good time to get medicated, because things like beta blockers are, I know those have been around for a while, but they're much more accessible and more likely to be prescribed, and those really sound like what I need, because it blocks the physical anxiety response, right? And that's one of the things I hate about my ADHD, is all the anxiety and the anxiety feelings and getting keyed up, and right? So, and that wasn't an option when I was a kid, because childhood psychology was not very advanced in Louisiana in the 80s and the 90s. So maybe now would be a really good time to get medicated again, if only to help me function a little bit better, and for me not to have to struggle so much to get the things I want to get done. But you know, even these vlogs are kind of, I mean, of course they're inspired by my ADHD, but a lot of them end up going very off the cuff and unscripted. I mean, I literally just had a list of like 3 things, right? I didn't have like notes or anything, and that's great if you do. Like, I'm not slamming that. I'm saying, like, I didn't this time, and yet, you know, we're going on 25 minutes of me talking at you guys, and I started with only 3 points. So just the fact that, like, I can go off on tangents and get really excited about tangents. I don't know. Those are all things I like in other people. So I'm sure some people who have watched this have had a really hard time with this, but I like it. So to each their own. Anyway, let me know how your ADHD has inspired your life, or how you've used your ADHD as inspiration. Might be a better way to put it. Feel free to get long and rambly and dissecting and unpicking the things in your life. I want us all to end this journey, when we're done with this journey, in a better place, and feeling better about ourselves and more accepting of who we are. And you can talk to me about this however you're comfortable. I will say I've gotten really bad about reading my comments, because so many of you guys are really, really nice, and then I'll get somebody who's just mean. Which I know it's YouTube, that happens all the time, but that's something I'm going to work on, and that's one of the challenges I'm going to add to my ADHD challenge sub-series, where, you know, we're going to like answer those comments together, the nice ones and the nasty ones, or maybe we'll ignore the nasty ones because we don't have to answer them, but that's one of the things I'm going to want to work on with you guys. So I will see you guys next week. I think we might be talking about, there's a few topics I'm kind of juggling in my mind about what we're going to talk about next week. How to ask for accommodations. Lists that work for you. Creating lists that work for you. ADHD positives. We have all kinds of, I like literally have like a bunch of like post-it notes in my diary and then lists in my diary too of things that we could talk about next week. So if there's one of them that I feel particularly passionate about, I will definitely talk about that. If not, I'll just pick one that sounds good and we'll get to chatting. So I'll see you guys next week. I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I hope you will find a way, if you haven't already, to allow your ADHD to positively inspire and influence your life and your work. So, bye guys!